Where are we going? What would the world end up like? Interesting question. Of course, the immediate future is too full of variables and uncertainty, which makes any type of short-term or medium-term prediction haphazard at best. However, given the complete lack of ideological bearing, or moral compass, if you will, shown by the general population at the moment, I thought it an opportune time to show the direction we must head if we are to live in harmony and enjoyment. Unfortunately, this video does not leave enough time to go into much in-depth, so we will have to stick with a summary. So, number 1. A consequential balance of rights and responsibility. Sounds abstract? Let me explain. If you have a social order that gives you little rights but lots of responsibility, the population over time will become more and more apathetic to their task, and more resentful of their restrictions. They will inevitably subvert authority. On the other side, if you have a society with many rights and little responsibility, here there is no clear connection between the two, which inevitably leads to self-righteousness and a tendency to rate one's own rights over those of others, leading to social discord as members of society agitate against each other to serve their own interest. Individually, every freedom of right we get is paired with an additional responsibility. You get it to drive, you have to obey the rules. You get your independence, you have to look after yourself, and so forth. So what do we do if you have the additional responsibility or power over other people and not ourselves? A position of power, if you will. Power over others is an additional right. Judges, politicians have additional rights, so also have additional responsibility. Now these responsibilities include impartiality and incorruptibility. The responsibility must be guaranteed, not wished for, not hoped for, but guaranteed. This power over others is such that these individuals must be prepared to sacrifice some of their other personal rights so as to be able to guarantee as much as possible their responsibility. All contributing adults in society thus have similar rights overall, from the cleaner all the way to the president. Those with power over others, additional rights, sacrifice some of their personal rights for this privilege. For example, those with authority over society's funds, taxes, politicians must disclose all of their finances for their remaining life and have limitations on future employment and income from any source that may have led to a lack of impartiality while in power, including gifts from relatives, friends, which would have such connections. Degrees of financial transparency would be common for almost all positions of power, executive, judicial, and legislative. Similarly, those that do not fulfill their responsibility must lose their corresponding rights, and this must be allowed to continue all the way down to subsistence level. Our current correction facilities are nothing but holding pens. There is little to no correction going on in general, and the cost per inmate is an additional burden on society. Inmates must be largely self-sufficient and with only facilities and amenities provided that they themselves can produce and maintain. They have no right to be a burden on society. They have transgressed against society. They need to understand that they are responsible for their rights. Further transgression must be consequently dealt with. Disrupting the rights of others while incarcerated must lead to further physical restrictions, hard labour, and worse amenities and food corresponding with their inability to contribute to society within the prison system. Murder and assault must be appropriately dealt with. You deliberately take a life, your life is forfeit. Your rights are gone for your life. Only those who show an exceptional contribution to their society have a hope of regaining their former rights. A correctional facility must also be able to clearly reward those that accept their responsibility and contribute to society, or in the case of a prison, their fellow inmates and guards, and those that continue to ignore their responsibility and continue to infringe the rights of others must see a continual degradation of their condition down to subsistence level and near isolation. To avoid abuse, we refer back to those in positions of power needing to balance their additional rights over other individuals with a loss of other rights for themselves. For guards, this would include a loss of anonymity at work in addition to the normal need for a degree of financial transparency. The prisoners have lost their rights in any case, so a thorough overwatch system in the prison, monitored externally, possibly by members of the public, would serve as a good safeguard. With the increased ease and cost efficiency of such systems, this is not a complex exercise. An ability for family to monitor loved ones in the correction facility would ensure that those most vulnerable are not targeted. There must be a solid continuous link with rights and responsibility, with a trade-off between rights over others and personal rights, guaranteeing as much as possible that responsibilities are fulfilled. Thus all citizens have similar rights over all. Transgressions must lead to a consequential loss of rights, while dedicated contribution to society must result in a renewal of rights if formerly lost. Only thus can we ensure rehabilitation, stability, and the removal of institutional corruption and abuse by those in power. Number 2, the removal of us and them. As long as there is an institution, be it government, religion, or others, that attempts to foster division and justify a sense of superiority, be it moral or otherwise, there will be endless conflict. Identifying your sense of self-worth via a group, regardless of actual moral practices, is a recipe to disaster in the long term, no matter how it is packaged. Your values as a person does not lie with the abstract notion of those you associate with in this group's supposed collective achievements. It lies purely with your own interactions with those around you. Nationalism must give way to globalism if we are to have a chance of peace and prosperity. Just like loyalty to the family eventually extended to the tribe, which then extended to the town and city, to regions, and finally where we are now, national identity, so too this final hurdle must be crossed until we identify with everyone on the planet. Each step forward has brought greater security and prosperity on aggregate, and has been deeply opposed by those in power of the old loyalty order. Time for our loyalties to be to all people. There is no other way. Similarly, religions need a global unifier. Now, like with a change from nationalism to globalism, this is not possible through conquest and the global victory of one ideology or nation. Politically, the path to globalism will have to be through a cultural soft power, or demonstrating the superiority of this ideology and excluding those who do not wish to undertake the required changes to emulate this prosperity, until they themselves request to join and undertake the institutional and social reforms themselves. Religion is different because its core concept is an us versus them mentality. We go to heaven, they go to hell. This can't help but lead to a sense of superiority, and thus conflict in the long term. There is only one way to fix this, and while being simple, it will be hard for many to accept. Every religion must admit to themselves that their religion, traditions, and dogma are but one path to God. Each must admit that a person of any religious background, if good, will have a positive spiritual outcome, whatever that may be. Religions are interpretations on how to undertake our lives so as to have a positive spiritual outcome. The many different variations have their own peculiarities, but it is the result that counts more, not so much the methods. This is a religious globalism. All religions' actors are united in a single struggle to live their life in such a way as to achieve a positive spiritual outcome. This removes the biggest mechanism of abuse from the religious institutions: fear. Religions would have to work harder in promoting and demonstrating their positive attributes and how they help you become a better person, as conversion no longer results in hell. This removal of fear and shifting of focus from avoidance of the negative, hell and sinners, to the attainment of the positive, spiritual enlightenment and saints, will do much to ensure harmony and enjoyment for all, while not restricting individual practices, as long as they don't impact the rights of others. Social order. So, will it be socialism or capitalism wins out in the end? Big government with lots of rules, or small government with no rules? A free-for-all, so to speak. The answer is none of the above, because all these options are just a collection of ideas. We need to pick the best outcomes from the best components. And what is this magical combination? A good balance of all. As all governments are institutional in nature, and all institutions in the long term suffer from the same pitfalls regardless of the name at the entrance, it is important to ensure that every effort is placed into stopping the rot, so to speak. For more details on the nature and cycles of institutions, please go check out the video linked in the description below. The requirement to offset the additional rights attained over others by sacrificing personal rights should go a long way to remove the attractiveness of government institutions for those seeking power for the sake of it or for self-gain. The other main component is to realize that the global government is there for only one thing: making rules. Once these rules are set, the government has no task. Even emergency situations are better handled by individuals trained in their management. Specifically, even a reaction to a disaster, from the government perspective, has an optimal automated response which doesn't require government intervention. In the end, the global government will be nothing but a ceremonial position with a skeleton administrative staff. Any new laws or rules will generate a temporary commission with elected officials and then be dissolved once the new rules are agreed. The remnants of the Global Defence Force, which will be effectively changed to a Disaster Management Reserve and Disaster Rapid Response Task Force, will have a standard budget agreed by the regional administrations groups. The point here is that the global government has effectively no control of any finance. It is all automated. Regional government is only responsible for the discretionary Regional Development Fund, effectively infrastructure projects based on an agreed 5 to 10 year plan and an agreed budget voted for by the local governments. Local governments have the vast majority of control over finance, about 90%, so must be fully transparent, just like the other two levels, only more so. With every cent tracked and traceable by members of the public, each department's budget, salaries, purchases must be fully traceable in real time. Not too difficult nowadays with the implementation of modern technology. Fixed budgets allocations should be part of the election process and effectively voted for by the public, with the allocation of public finance being fully transparent and effectively allocated through the voting process. The last mechanism for leveraging power must also be removed. Privileges, subsidies, licenses, and permits. The only rules the government can create must affect all individuals equally. No subsidies, permits, or license can be handed out that would restrict access to a professional resource to anyone fulfilling a common set of qualifications open to all. This extends to all institutions that have a legal monopoly of licenses, including the education, medical, legal, and regulatory professions, guilds, unions, and any institution monopolizing and controlling access to work or resources through restrictive membership practices and the threat of force, even legal, must eventually be dissolved. The rights of the individual never extends to curtail or restrict the rights of another individual. The right of an individual must be paramount. Anything else cannot hold. As you can tell, this is no nanny state. The power of the state is concentrated in one single dynamic place, ensuring that individuals do not infringe on the rights of others. The government sets the rules that apply to everyone, then ensures that those who infringe have their actions corrected. The police and state have no power over any person who does not infringe on the rights of others. Now, some may think this is laissez-faire and exploitative capitalism at its worst. The removal of privileges, permits or licenses, tariffs and subsidies is indeed proposed, but not the removal of regulations. Environmental, work safety, etc., all regulations that are universal and equally affect all people are what the government is for. It is there to set the rules of the game and referee it, nothing else. It is the electorate that votes on these rules depending on who they put in power, though ultimately it will have to steady out into a single steady regulation that balances the rights of the individual with the responsibility that this right entails, leading to a downsizing of the rule-making body down to a ceremonial skeleton. This inevitably leads to minimal government in terms of size and taxation. Individuals are provided with basic living allowance, possibly a negative tax, if required, and the rest is up to them. If individuals prove themselves incapable of taking care of themselves, support needs to be provided, non-mandatory. However, this forfeit of responsibility of the individual must be accommodated by a loss of rights, normally privacy, financial transparency, etc. This as practicable, given the resources available to provide this service. As you can tell, the control of money that constitutes the biggest avenue of power abuse. The removal of government control of funds is only one step. Excessive private wealth accumulation is also contrary to a balance between rights and responsibility. Though rich and poor must exist to ensure the rights of individuals, the existence of the mega-rich tips the balance of rights and responsibility. This topic is too complex to cover here. See the link in the description below to cover this fully. But one thing is certain, in the end it won't be either big government or the mega-rich elite. It will be small government, with a few poor, most middle, upper middle, and a reasonable amount of very well off, but no mega rich. So there you go. I hope this brief glimpse of where we must go has been of interest and has helped some to see more clearly where they are now and what directions they must start to head if this is to become reality. Because this is truly our only future. Because the alternative is quite simply self-destruction. Or no future at all. Anyway, all the best. Until next time.